There is a number that shouldn't exist. If you add up all the money every government on Earth has borrowed, you get a figure so large it sounds like a hallucination. $97 trillion in public debt. If you add in corporations and households, the number explodes to $315 trillion. But here's the paradox that breaks the human brain. If the United States owes $35 trillion, and China owes $14 trillion, and Japan owes $9 trillion, who is on the other side of the trade? If I owe you $10, I am minus 10, and you are plus 10. The net balance is zero, but on Earth, everyone is in the red. The planet itself has a negative balance sheet. So who is the creditor? Are we paying interest to Mars? Is there a secret bank on the moon collecting the payments? This isn't a conspiracy theory. It is something much darker. It is the design of the machine itself. We are not in debt to a person. We are in debt to a mechanism that has enslaved every nation, every government, and every citizen for 300 years. And the scary part isn't that we owe the money. The scary part is what happens when the mechanism decides to collect. To understand who we owe, you have to understand how we got tricked. Go back 300 years. Before the modern world, debt was personal. If a king wanted to fight a war, he had to physically have the gold. If he didn't, he borrowed it from a merchant. If the king lost the war, the merchant didn't get paid. If the king died, the debt died with him. It was risky. It was physical. It was real. But in 1694, England broke reality. King William III was fighting France. He was broke. No merchant would lend to him because kings were terrible borrowers. So a group of bankers made him an offer that changed the species forever. They said, "We won't lend you the gold. We will create a bank, the Bank of England. We will give you paper notes to pay your soldiers. And in return, you will demand that the citizens pay taxes in this paper." It was alchemy. They turned the king's need for money into money itself. This was the birth of the government bond. A piece of paper that says, "I promise to pay you back with interest from the taxes of people who haven't even been born yet." Suddenly, debt wasn't a burden. It was an asset. The rich loved it. Instead of sitting on gold that did nothing, they could buy government bonds and get a guaranteed stream of tax money forever. The king loved it. He could fight wars without waiting for the gold to be mined. The system conquered the world. It built the British Empire. It funded the American Revolution. It defeated Napoleon. But it came with a hidden cost, because the money is the debt. This is the part they don't teach in school. In our modern system, money is created by borrowing. When the government issues a bond, it is creating debt. When a bank gives you a mortgage, it is creating debt. If we paid off all the debt tomorrow, if every government, corporation, and person paid back what they owed, every dollar, euro, and yen in existence would vanish. There would be no money left. So the debt can never be paid. It can only grow. That brings us back to the $315 trillion question. If the debt can never be paid, and everyone owes it, who is holding the bag? Who owns the world? The answer is a hierarchy, a pyramid of power. And depending on where the debt is held, the consequences change from annoying to catastrophic. Layer 1, the left pocket paying the right pocket. When you hear the U.S. is $35 trillion in debt, you picture a loan shark breaking America's kneecaps. But the reality is more incestuous. About $7 trillion of that debt is money the U.S. government owes to itself. The Social Security Trust Fund collects your taxes. It doesn't put that cash in a mattress. It buys U.S. Treasury bonds. The Military Pension Fund buys Treasury bonds. This is an accounting trick. One part of the government, the Treasury, spends the money, and another part, Social Security, holds the receipt. It's like taking money from your savings account to pay off your credit card, but you own the credit card company. It's a closed loop. Layer 2, the domestic trap. This is where it gets personal. Who owns the rest? You do. Pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, banks. If you have a 401k, you are the creditor. If you have a bank account, the bank takes your deposit and buys government debt with it. This is the genius of the system. The government borrows money to exist. It pays interest on that debt. To pay the interest, it taxes you. But the interest goes back to your pension fund. It is a circular suicide pact. If the U.S. government defaulted, if they said, "We aren't paying," it wouldn't be China that suffers most. It would be grandma's pension. It would be the insurance company paying for your car crash. It would be the bank that holds your payroll. The government has turned its own citizens into human shields. They can't let the system fail because the voters are the ones holding the bag. Layer 3, the foreign handcuffs. Now we get to the geopolitical drama. For decades, people screamed that China owns America. We are selling our soul to Beijing. Let's look at the numbers. Foreign countries own about $8 trillion of U.S. debt. Japan owns the most, about $1.1 trillion. China is second, with around $770 billion. The UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium hold massive amounts too. Why? Why would China lend money to its rival? Because they have to. China exports stuff, Americans buy stuff. China ends up with trillions of US dollars. China can't spend those dollars in Shanghai. They can't pay Chinese workers in dollars. So they have to put that money somewhere safe that earns interest. The only pool big enough to hold that much cash is the US bond market. It's a trap. China has to lend to the US so the US can keep buying Chinese goods. If China sold all its US debt tomorrow, the dollar would crash. Americans would stop buying iPhones and the Chinese economy would collapse. It's financial mutually assured destruction. But there is a fourth layer, the most dangerous one, the one that explains why the number is $315 trillion. Layer 4, the shadow creditors. This is where the map goes blank. A huge chunk of global debt isn't owed to a government or a pension fund. It is owed to the shadow banking system, hedge funds, private equity, offshore holding companies in the Cayman Islands. These entities don't take deposits. They don't have insurance. They lend money to corporations and governments using derivatives, bets on bets on bets. They create credit out of thin air, outside the view of any central bank. Estimates suggest the derivative market, the web of promises tied to this debt, could be over $1 quadrillion. That's a 1 followed by 15 zeros. This is the ghost in the machine. These are the creditors who don't care about your pension or national security. They only care about the yield. And when they panic, the world burns. So if the debt is circular and the foreigners are trapped and the shadow banks are gambling, why does it matter? Why can't we just print more? That is exactly what we're doing. The final creditor, the buyer of last resort, is the central bank. The Federal Reserve, the ECB, the Bank of Japan. When nobody else wants to buy the debt, the central bank steps in. They click a button. They create digits. They buy the debt. In 2008, the system broke. The Fed printed. In 2020, the system broke. The Fed printed $3 trillion in weeks. They have discovered a cheat code. They can monetize the debt. They can eat their own tail. But remember the rule of alchemy. You cannot create something from nothing without a cost. The cost isn't money. The cost is time. When a government prints money to pay debt, they are diluting the value of the currency you hold. They are stealing your purchasing power. We don't owe the money to China. We don't owe it to the banks. We owe it to the future. Every dollar of debt is a claim on future energy, future labor, and future taxes. By borrowing $315 trillion, we have spent the productivity of the next 3 generations. We have eaten our grandchildren's lunch, dinner, and retirement. The creditor isn't a person. The creditor is entropy. What happens when the creditor comes to collect? We don't have to guess. We have seen it. Look at Sri Lanka in 2022. The government had too much debt. They printed money to pay it. Inflation soared. The currency collapsed. Suddenly, the circular system stopped working. Foreigners refused to lend. The central bank's money was worthless paper. The lights went out. The fuel ran out. The food ran out. The people stormed the palace and swam in the president's pool. But that's a small country, you say. That can't happen to the West. It almost happened to the UK in September 2022. The Prime Minister announced a plan to borrow more money. The shadow banks, specifically the pension funds using derivatives, panicked. They started selling UK debt. The interest rates spiked. The British pound crashed. For about 6 hours, one of the most powerful economies on earth was on the edge of total insolvency. The Bank of England had to panic print billions to stop the bleeding. The Prime Minister lasted 49 days. The market is the ultimate creditor, and the market is losing patience. The United States is now paying more in interest on its debt than it spends on its entire military. $1 trillion a year, just in interest. To pay that interest, they have to borrow more. It is a death spiral. So, to answer the question, who do we owe? We owe the system that allows us to live beyond our means. We owe the silence. The entire global economy is built on a bluff. The bluff is that the debt will be paid back, but the math says it won't. It mathematically cannot. There are only 3 ways this ends. 1, we default. The government says sorry, and the financial system vaporizes instantly. Pensions gone, savings gone, supply chains broken, a new dark age. 2, we pay it back. We tax everyone at 90% for 50 years and live in poverty to clear the balance sheet. Politically impossible. 3, the most likely option. We inflate it away. Governments will keep printing. They will make the money worth less, so the debt is easier to pay. Who pays for that? You do. You pay for it at the grocery store. You pay for it when housing prices double. You pay for it when your savings account yields 0.1%, while inflation is 5%. The creditor is the government. The debtor is you. The $315 trillion isn't money we owe to aliens. It is the price tag of the illusion. And the scary part isn't that the illusion will break. The scary part is that they will do anything to keep it going. Smart money knows this. That's why central banks are buying gold at record rates. They're hedging against their own paper. They know the debt is unpayable. They know the currency is the release valve. The world is in debt to itself, and the only way to settle the account is to devalue the world. If this terrified you, good. Fear is the first step to preparation. History is a circle. I'll show you where the wheel turns next. Hit subscribe.